A woman named Margaret was 73 years old when she sat across from me in my office and placed a small handwritten list on my desk. It was a list of every medication she had been taking for the past 9 years. 11 medications. She had highlighted 4 of them in yellow. Those were the ones she told me were just for blood pressure. She looked at me and said, "Doctor, I do everything they tell me. I walk. I watch my salt. I take every pill. Why is my pressure still 170/95 every single morning?" That question stayed with me, not because I didn't have an answer, but because the answer had nothing to do with her medications. It had everything to do with what was happening in her body between 10 at night and 6 in the morning. A window of biological activity that most cardiologists discuss in research papers, but almost nobody explains to the people sitting in the waiting room. What you do before you close your eyes, specifically what you drink, has a measurable, documented physiological effect on your overnight blood pressure. And for people over 60, that effect is not small. Stay with me, because what I am about to walk you through is information I wish someone had handed Margaret 9 years earlier. My name is Dr. Eleanor Voss. I have spent 31 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon. In that time, I have performed more than 2,000 open heart procedures and held beating hearts in my hands through the most precarious minutes of another human being's life. I have read the pressure numbers. I have seen what happens when overnight hypertension goes unmanaged for years. The interior of an artery that has been under excessive pressure for a decade looks different than one that is not. The walls thicken. The lining hardens. The flexibility that a healthy vessel has, that gentle rhythmic give with each pulse, disappears. What I am sharing today is not alternative medicine. It is physiology. It is the science of what your cardiovascular system is doing while you sleep, and why what you consume in the final hour before bed intersects with that process in ways that are now well documented and largely ignored in standard patient care. Here is what nobody tells you. The medical system measures your blood pressure at 2 in the afternoon in a clinical office. It rarely talks to you about what is happening at 2 in the morning, which is frequently where the real damage is being done. After 60, the body undergoes a series of changes that make nighttime blood pressure management both more important and more challenging. The kidneys, which are one of the primary regulators of blood pressure through their control of fluid volume and sodium excretion, begin a gradual decline in filtration efficiency. By the time most people are in their late 60s, kidney filtration rate has dropped by 20 to 40% from peak function. What that means in practical terms is this. Sodium that a 30-year-old body might process and excrete overnight now lingers. Fluid that should move out stays in. And volume, the sheer amount of blood being pushed through your vessels, goes up. Think of it this way. Imagine your arterial system as a garden hose. In a younger body, the hose is flexible, the pressure at the nozzle is regulated, and the pump at the other end cycles down at night during sleep. In a body over 60, the hose has become less flexible, the pump does not cycle down as efficiently, and someone has quietly been adding more water to the tank. A 2019 analysis from the American Journal of Hypertension found that adults over 65 are significantly more likely than younger adults to exhibit what is called non-dipping blood pressure, meaning their pressure does not drop naturally during sleep as it should. Non-dipping is associated with substantially higher cardiovascular event risk. Write that down. Non-dipping. It is the silent pattern that the single before bed drink I am about to describe directly addresses. Now we reach the part I want you to lean into. 5 things, 5 items I am going to walk you through. Not medications, not procedures. 5 evidence-based realities about one specific drink and how its compounds interact with your cardiovascular system overnight. Some of what I am about to say will surprise you. One of these items surprises almost every patient I have shared it with. Let's begin. The first item is nitric oxide. If you have never heard this phrase in connection with blood pressure, that absence is itself a problem. Nitric oxide is a molecule your body produces naturally, and its primary job in the cardiovascular system is to cause vasodilation, the relaxation and widening of blood vessel walls. When nitric oxide is present at adequate levels, your vessels open slightly, resistance drops, and your blood moves through at lower pressure. When nitric oxide is depleted, and after 60, production declines significantly, vessels stay constricted, and pressure climbs. The drink I am describing is tart cherry juice. Unsweetened, pure tart cherry juice, 100 to 240 milliliters consumed 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. Tart cherries are one of the highest known dietary sources of naturally occurring nitrates, which the body converts to nitric oxide through a pathway involving bacteria in the mouth and the lining of the stomach. When you drink it before bed, you are essentially supplying your body with the raw material it needs to produce vessel-relaxing molecules during the hours when your cardiovascular system is most vulnerable to pressure spikes. The mechanism is not speculative. It is the same pathway that dietary nitrate researchers have been studying for 2 decades. And for a body over 60 that is producing less nitric oxide on its own, that nightly supply matters. The second item is melatonin and its relationship to blood pressure. And this is where most people pause and say, wait, I thought melatonin was just for sleep. It is for sleep. But the reason it affects sleep is the same reason it affects blood pressure. Melatonin is a hormone that, among other things, signals the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for rest, recovery, and the physiological downshift that should occur during sleep. Part of that downshift is a reduction in sympathetic tone, which is the fight-or-flight nervous system activity that keeps blood pressure elevated. In people who experience non-dipping blood pressure overnight, one consistent finding is reduced melatonin activity. Tart cherries contain naturally occurring melatonin, one of the very few food sources that does. The melatonin in tart cherry juice is not present at pharmaceutical levels, but it is bioavailable, meaning the body absorbs and uses it. Combined with the nitric oxide pathway, you have two independent blood pressure-relevant mechanisms in the same glass. Stay with me. We are not finished. Here is where I need you to stop before I tell you the third item, because what I am about to say reframes everything that comes before it. There is a reason this combination works particularly well for people over 60, and it has nothing to do with the cherries themselves. It has to do with timing. The vascular window of 3 to 6 in the morning, what researchers sometimes call the early morning surge, is the period when cardiovascular events are statistically most common. Heart attacks, strokes, and sudden cardiac episodes cluster in this window because of a confluence of factors. Cortisol begins rising, sympathetic nervous activity increases, platelet aggregation, the tendency of blood to clot, goes up, and vessel walls are at their stiffest after the lowest point of nighttime body temperature. If you are going to intervene pharmacologically or nutritionally in blood pressure, the goal is to have those compounds active in your system during this window. A drink consumed 30 to 60 minutes before sleep in a compound that has a 4 to 5 hour absorption and metabolic activity curve will be biochemically active during exactly this period. The timing is not accidental. It is the entire point. The third item is anthocyanins, the compounds that give tart cherries their deep red color, and their effect on arterial stiffness. Arterial stiffness is not a casual term. It is a measured clinical parameter, assessed through a calculation called pulse wave velocity, and it is one of the strongest independent predictors of cardiovascular mortality in adults over 60. Stiff arteries cannot absorb the wave of pressure from each heartbeat. They transmit it. That transmitted pressure damages the kidneys, the brain, the eyes, and the heart itself over time. Anthocyanins have been studied for their ability to reduce markers of vascular inflammation and improve endothelial function, the function of the inner lining of blood vessels. A randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found measurable reductions in systolic blood pressure in participants who consumed tart cherry juice versus placebo over a 12-week period. The effect size was modest in isolation, but here is the clinical reality. Modest daily effects, compounded over months and years, are exactly how blood pressure damage accumulates in the first place. The same compounding that works against you when pressure stays chronically elevated works for you when you address it consistently. Every night, starting tonight. The fourth item concerns something I see neglected in almost every hypertension conversation, and it is hydration status at the moment of sleep. When the body is even mildly dehydrated at bedtime, and mild dehydration is extraordinarily common in older adults whose thirst mechanism becomes less accurate with age, several pressure-elevating processes activate simultaneously. Blood volume drops slightly, which signals the kidneys to retain sodium, which further concentrates the blood and raises pressure. The cardiovascular system responds by increasing peripheral resistance, essentially squeezing the vessels tighter to maintain adequate perfusion pressure to the brain and vital organs. A small volume of liquid consumed before bed, 100 to 240 milliliters, which is the therapeutic range for tart cherry juice, addresses this hydration component directly. It is not enough liquid to cause sleep-disrupting trips to the bathroom in most people. It is enough to shift the body away from the mild dehydration state that silently elevates overnight pressure. For Margaret, this alone may have been contributing to those 9 years of uncontrolled morning readings. The fifth item is the one I said would surprise you, and I want you to hold it carefully because it changes how you think about this entire conversation. The benefit of the before-bed drink is not primarily about the drink. It is about what the ritual replaces. In my clinical experience and in the research literature on behavioral cardiology, the period from 8 to 10 in the evening is when most adults over 60 consume the highest sodium, highest sugar, and most physiologically disruptive foods and drinks of their entire day. A small bowl of something salty, A glass of a beverage that contains sugar, which spikes insulin, which in turn activates sympathetic nervous activity that raises blood pressure. A nightcap, which initially seems to lower pressure but causes a rebound elevation in the second half of sleep that is well documented and clinically significant. When you replace that late evening pattern with a glass of tart cherry juice, you are not just adding something beneficial. You are removing something harmful. The cardiovascular load that the body carries into sleep is fundamentally different when the last thing consumed is a small amount of an anti-inflammatory, nitrate-rich, melatonin-containing liquid versus what most people are actually consuming. Here is what nobody tells you. The medication prescribed at 2 in the afternoon cannot fully compensate for the damage done at 9:30 at night. The two are fighting each other, and the 2 in the afternoon is losing. I want to tell you something I do not normally say in clinical settings. I have stood in operating rooms at 3 in the morning with a patient's chest open, and in those moments, I think about the families in the waiting room. I think about the years of ordinary choices that accumulated into the crisis in front of me. The extra pinch of salt, the evening glass of something. The years of non-dipping blood pressure that nobody caught because the office readings looked acceptable enough. I do not share this to frighten you. I share it because the distance between the waiting room and the operating table is not fate. It is a series of incremental daily decisions, and some of those decisions are smaller and more accessible than people believe. A glass of tart cherry juice is not a dramatic intervention. That is precisely why I want you to take it seriously. The dramatic interventions come when the small ones are skipped for long enough. That question has stayed with me. Margaret's question, why is it still high? 3 months after our conversation, she sent a message to my office. She had started drinking 4 ounces of unsweetened tart cherry juice each night before bed. She had also, based on our discussion, stopped the salted crackers that had been her nightly habit for years and replaced them with the juice. At her next monitoring check, her average overnight readings had dropped by 14 points systolic and 9 points diastolic. She was not taken off medications. That decision belongs to her prescribing physician and that physician alone. But her doctor did note in writing that the overnight pattern had normalized in a way that had not been seen in years. Margaret told me what she told her daughter about it. She said, all those years, and nobody told me about the window. The window of 3 to 6 in the morning. The window that was always there, that the drink now addresses, that the prescription could never fully close on its own. Let me bring this together for you clearly. 1. Tart cherry juice consumed before bed supplies dietary nitrates that convert to nitric oxide, which relaxes vessel walls overnight. 2. It contains naturally occurring melatonin, which supports the parasympathetic downshift that allows blood pressure to dip during sleep. 3. Its anthocyanins address arterial stiffness and vascular inflammation, 2 of the primary structural contributors to elevated pressure in people over 60. 4. Its fluid volume addresses the mild bedtime dehydration that activates pressure-raising hormonal responses in the kidneys. 5. The ritual of drinking it replaces high sodium, high sugar, or alcohol-containing evening habits that actively undermine overnight blood pressure regulation. The dose that appears in the research literature is 100 to 240 milliliters, roughly 4 to 8 ounces, of unsweetened pure tart cherry juice, consumed 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Not sweetened cherry drink, not a blend, unsweetened tart cherry. I want you to drop a comment below right now and tell me, do you have a before-bed routine currently? And has anyone ever connected that routine to your overnight blood pressure? I read these comments. Your experience matters to the people reading alongside you. If this information helped you understand something about your body that you did not fully understand before today, share this video with someone you care about. One share puts this information in front of someone who may be sitting with the same question Margaret sat with for 9 years. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the next video covers the morning habit that directly determines how your blood pressure behaves for the rest of the day, and it has nothing to do with what you eat. It is never too late. Your heart has been working for you every single minute of every hour of your life without asking for a break. Give it this one small thing tonight. One final word. I am a surgeon and a researcher, and nothing in this video is a substitute for the guidance of your personal physician. If you are on blood pressure medication, do not adjust or discontinue it without consultation. Tart cherry juice contains natural sugars and may interact with certain medications, including blood thinners. Speak with your doctor before adding it to your routine if you have any concerns. What I have shared is information. What you do with it belongs in a conversation with the person who knows your full medical history. That is what good medicine looks like, and that is what you deserve.